It's official. Washington just froze. The shutdown isn't a threat anymore. It's here. And this time, it's not just about missing paychecks. It's about who really runs the country. Yeah, you heard that right. Donald Trump has slammed the brakes on billions of dollars, funds Congress already approved, and he's refusing to release them. Transportation projects, state programs, healthcare grants, gone. The president calls it fiscal discipline, but to the people watching their states bleed, it looks more like punishment. Here's the kicker. This isn't gridlock. It's a power grab, and it's exposing something no one in Washington wants to admit. Congress can pass all the bills at once, but if the White House doesn't move the money, it means nothing. To understand how we got here, let's rewind. October 1st, budget deadline. Lawmakers fail to agree. Republicans demand spending cuts. Democrats demand protections for healthcare and schools. Nobody blinks. The lights go out. Federal workers furloughed. Agencies locked. Then, out of nowhere, the White House does something no president has dared in decades. It freezes federal funds, billions of them, even for programs that already had congressional approval. Within hours, phones start ringing in state capitals. Where's the money? Budgets implode overnight. Infrastructure plans stall. Paychecks bounce. And governors, even Republican ones, start panicking. Because this isn't about one line item. It's about the entire pipeline between Congress and the country. Trump didn't just shut the government, he cut the hose. Inside Capitol Hill, confusion turns to shock. The House majority thought they'd call the shots. They don't. The Senate thought it had leverage. It doesn't. For the first time in modern history, Congress, the branch that controls the nation's wallet, is watching someone else hold the checkbook. And here's what makes it worse. The freeze didn't hit every state equally. The biggest cuts? They landed on Democratic strongholds: New York, California, Illinois, states that challenged Trump on climate policy, immigration, and social programs. Coincidence? No one's buying that. Democrats call it retribution, Republicans call it strategy, and Trump calls it leadership. He told reporters, quote, "If they won't cooperate, they won't get funded." That's not negotiation. That's political extortion on a national scale. The reaction was instant and explosive. Democrats accused the president of dismantling the Constitution. Republicans scrambled to explain how this isn't an abuse of power. Cable news went into full-blown meltdown. Images of closed offices, unpaid workers, and empty food bank lines looped on repeat. Meanwhile, everyday Americans are trapped in the crossfire. Families waiting on federal benefits, contractors with frozen pay, small-town mayors begging for state aid that never arrives, and Washington still arguing about who to blame. Here's the part that's driving people crazy. Republicans control Congress. They hold the majority, yet they can't stop the president from freezing their own budget. The same lawmakers who bragged about taking back control are suddenly powerless in their own house. That's not politics anymore. That's paralysis. Behind closed doors, tempers are exploding. One senator reportedly shouted, "We gave him the money, he just won't spend it." Another warned, "If we let this stand, we'll never get it back." And they're right, because this moment, this quiet freeze that most Americans haven't even processed yet, is rewriting the rules of government. The president has discovered something terrifyingly effective. He doesn't have to veto a bill. He can just ignore it. Think about that. No speeches, no votes, no compromise, just silence. And in that silence, power shifts. The fallout is already spreading. Federal food aid is running out. Disaster relief checks are delayed. Road construction has stopped in 12 states, and analysts are warning this could trigger layoffs before Thanksgiving. Markets are jittery. Governors are furious. Even Trump's allies are nervous. Because if the funding freeze drags on, their own voters, farmers, veterans, small business owners, will feel it next. But the White House isn't backing down. Officials say the freeze will stay until Congress passes a responsible bill. Translation, until they bend. This is no longer about policy. It's a standoff over who gets to call the shots in America, the legislature that writes the laws or the president who decides whether to follow them. Reporters are calling it the silent coup. Legal experts say it's the biggest constitutional stress test since Watergate.
And ordinary people, they're just trying to survive it. Because while Washington plays power games, paychecks are disappearing and services are dying on the vine.
Here's what makes this shutdown different. Previous ones ended when someone finally blinked. This time, no one's even blinking. Trump believes leverage equals victory. Democrats believe resistance equals survival. And between those two egos lies the real cost. Millions of Americans paying for a fight they didn't start. You can feel the anxiety building in the air. Markets dipping, rallies forming, governors threatening lawsuits, mayors pleading for emergency funds. Even foreign leaders are watching, wondering if Washington can still function. Because here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. If the government can't fund itself, the global economy starts to lose faith in the American system. And once that faith cracks, it doesn't come back easily. But the real bombshell is what's happening behind the scenes. Leaked memos show that White House staff have started reviewing which programs are ideologically aligned with the administration's goals. Translation: funds will flow to loyal states first. Everyone else waits. That's not governance. That's selective control. It's the kind of maneuver that blurs the line between leadership and domination. So ask yourself, what happens if this becomes the new normal? What if every president decides they can freeze funds whenever Congress says no? What happens to the idea of checks and balances when one branch simply freezes the other out? And that's where the cliffhanger hits. Because this shutdown, this freeze, isn't just a budget dispute anymore. It's a live experiment in how far executive power can stretch before democracy snaps. We've seen shutdowns before. We've never seen one like this. And the next move, whatever it is, will decide who really runs America, the people's representatives or the man in the Oval Office. Stay with me, because what happens next could change the system forever. The days that followed felt like watching a power outage roll across the map. First a few offices, then entire departments, then whole states fading into darkness. Federal workers checked their accounts. Nothing. State contractors called DC hotlines that rang without answer. And in the middle of all that chaos, the White House held firm. No funding until Congress gives in. Yeah, you heard that right. The President of the United States is using America's own budget as leverage against its elected lawmakers. The message couldn't be clearer. He decides who eats, who works, who waits. And that's when the panic really began, not just among Democrats, among Republicans too. Because if a Republican president can override a Republican Congress, then who's really in charge of the party anymore? Behind closed doors, GOP senators whispered the unthinkable. We've lost the purse. A few even floated a lawsuit against their own president, but no one wanted to be the first name on it. The fear was real. Cross him, and your funding line might be next. Meanwhile, Democrats pounced. They called it a coup in slow motion, a constitutional hijack hiding behind paperwork. They started drafting emergency resolutions demanding the funds be released. But resolutions don't feed hungry families. They don't reopen national parks or restart paychecks. And every day the freeze dragged on, ordinary Americans were paying the price. Imagine being a single mom in Ohio, waiting on SNAP benefits that never arrive. Or a Coast Guard officer in Virginia showing up for work with an empty bank account. Or a mayor in Arizona forced to furlough city staff because federal reimbursements vanished overnight. This isn't theory, it's reality, and it's spreading fast. By week 4, protests hit the streets. Unfreeze America signs filled the National Mall. Truckers circled D.C. in slow convoys, blaring horns. Airports began reporting staff shortages. And somewhere inside the West Wing, Trump's advisors started whispering about optics. But Trump didn't flinch. He called the protesters paid agitators. He called Congress broken. And he told reporters the freeze would stay as long as it takes. Here's the thing no one can deny. The longer this drags on, the more permanent it becomes. Every day the freeze continues, it normalizes something unthinkable. That the president can single-handedly decide what the government funds. Law professors call it the quiet constitutional crisis, because there's no gunfire, no riots, no tanks in the streets, just an inbox full of unpaid invoices, just a government starving itself from the inside out. Even the courts are struggling to respond.
Several judges have already ruled parts of the freeze unlawful, but enforcement takes time, and time is exactly what the White House wants. Every extra week cements the precedent: executive control over spending. Once that line is crossed, it never fully uncrosses. Inside Washington, both parties are fracturing. Moderates beg for compromise. Hardliners dig in. One Republican senator told a closed-door briefing, "If we cave now, he'll do it again before the election." A Democrat shot back, "If you don't stop him now, there won't be a Congress left to cave." That's the level of tension we're talking about. And through all of it, markets are shaking. Bond yields spike. The dollar dips. Credit agencies issue quiet warnings about political risk. For the first time in decades, global investors are asking whether America's checks are still good. Because if Congress can't guarantee spending, who can? That's the kind of doubt that kills empires. Not overnight, but piece by piece. Let's zoom out for a second. History's seen showdowns before. Nixon tried to impound funds in the 70s. Congress slapped him with the Impoundment Control Act. Clinton faced shutdowns, but never froze money already appropriated. Obama battled the debt ceiling, but payments still flowed. Even during Trump's first term, freezes were temporary. But this is the next evolution. It's not obstruction, it's override. It's one man reaching into the system's wiring and flipping the switch himself. And here's the dangerous part. It works. He doesn't need 218 votes in the House or 60 in the Senate. He just needs silence.
Because the longer lawmakers argue, the stronger his precedent grows. That's why legal scholars are calling this a turning point, not because of what's happening this week, but because of what every future president might learn from it. Power, once taken, is never given back voluntarily. Now, picture the political landscape 6 months from now. If the freeze holds, certain states will enter a recession, hospitals close, schools shorten hours, infrastructure decays, unemployment spikes. And when that happens, the president's message will be simple: elect people who cooperate and the money returns. That's not fiscal policy, that's economic blackmail on a national scale. Meanwhile, Democrats will turn this into campaign fuel. Vote for us, we'll unfreeze your state. The country splits deeper down the middle, and every new election becomes less about ideology and more about survival. That's how democracies die in plain sight, not through coups, but through budget lines. Here's the scene right now. The Speaker of the House gives fiery speeches that go nowhere. Senators hold press conferences that change nothing. Governors threaten lawsuits while laying off staff. And Trump's approval among his base, sky high. They see a fighter standing up to corrupt Washington. He sees a victory lap. Everyone else sees an unraveling system. The White House released a new statement today calling the freeze a necessary correction of decades of reckless spending. But make no mistake, this isn't about correction, it's about control. Every crisis becomes a ladder, and right now, the president's climbing higher than Congress ever imagined possible. So where does this go next? 3 roads, all bad. 1. Congress forces the courts to act. Judges issue injunctions, the White House appeals. It drags on for months. By the time rulings arrive, the damage is irreversible. 2. Republicans rebel. Enough of them side with Democrats to override the freeze legislatively, but that means open civil war inside the GOP, and Trump's base will torch anyone who votes against him. 3. The freeze holds. America adjusts. Agencies restructure to live with it, and what started as an emergency maneuver becomes the new normal. Pick your poison, because each one rewrites the playbook. And here's the final twist. This shutdown isn't even the real story anymore. It's the preview, a test drive for how far the presidency can go without consequence. And so far, no breaks. If this ends without accountability, the next president, Republican or Democrat, will know exactly what to do. Don't veto, don't negotiate, just freeze. And watch Congress beg for relevance. That's the nightmare scenario, a government where the people's representatives are just spectators while one man decides which states thrive and which starve. That's not democracy, that's design failure. So what happens now depends on you, the viewer,
the voter, the citizen still paying taxes while the government pretends your money doesn't exist. Do you think this is leadership or hostage-taking? Do you believe this is fiscal discipline or political blackmail? And more importantly, if they can freeze your state today, what makes you think they won't freeze your rights tomorrow? Yeah, let that sink in, because this story isn't ending anytime soon. It's just beginning, and when the next chapter drops, you'll want to be here to see it unfold. Like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the fight for control of America's wallet just turned into the fight for its soul.